Institute worldwide in recognition of exceptional implementation of the Adizes methodology, the outstanding dedication and commitment to lead change with mutual trust and respect. The Adizes Institute honors and bestows upon Maxim Healthcare Services Company of the Year for 2019. Before I break it,
Thank you, Dr. Adizes. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll start with a few words. I mean, Micah will be leading presentation. We agreed that we will do a ping pong session, so I'll be interfering with a little bit of comments, and he's comfortable with that. But he's star of the show, and our client is a star of the show today, so they will be leading the presentation. We started working with Maxim in 2016, and as Shoham mentioned, company at that time was actually bleeding cash. I mean, bleeding money. I mean, they were losing money. They were in the red zone, quite considerable amount. And we were lucky to have them with us, especially, I mean, the whole management team, and starting from Bill, who is not with us today, but who actually planned to join, but they have another wave of change in the company going on, so he needs to be home. And in basically a year and a half, company made a significant transformation. Even by the end of 2016, if I'm not mistaken, you guys broke even already. 17 was sort of pretty good year. 18 was the best year ever. 19 was better than 18, right? So I'm really looking forward for a company future. Michael led lots of efforts, and he and Rob, two internal integrators that were trained by the Institute in 17, basically spread the methodology in a significant part of the company and put seeds for future growth as well. So Micah, go.
All right. Thanks, Pavel. Appreciate it. So yeah, he'll be interrupting regularly, which I look forward to for additional context. So again, first and foremost, I'm honored to be here on behalf of Maxim Healthcare Services to receive the award. Very grateful. I didn't even know there was a potential for an award. I would have worked much harder, but it's okay. It worked out in the end, I suppose. So just want to kind of let you guys get to know me a little bit more. So wanted to kind of do a lightning round of DeFreeze answers for you so you have a better idea of who I am. My first car was a 1985 blue Honda Civic hatchback. My first concert was Boyz II Men in 6th grade. My favorite breakfast cereal is Fruity Pebbles. I prefer Coke over Pepsi. Wait, where's Ringson? I prefer Pepsi over Coke. Let's see, what else? I like Elvis over the Beatles. And at work, I'm an EI. At home, I'm a PA. So today, I want to go through, let me make sure this is on. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of intro to Maxim Healthcare Services, what we do, the industry we're in. The model that we have is a little unique. The industry we're in is very niche. It might make more sense in the States because we don't have socialized healthcare, so it's a very different system. We'll go through an organizational structure. I want to give you an idea of what the structure is today so you can understand how we're laid out across the United States. We'll get into a little history lesson, which will be an organizational life cycle study. For that, I think Pavel will help with a lot of additional context as I'm still learning the life cycle and some of the additional terms outside of the basics. We'll go through why did we hire Adizes, what was going on in 2016 that our CEO, Bill Butt, said, hey, we need outside help. We're mechanistic, we're not organic yet. How do we get outside help? What did the Adizes process do? And Pavel specifically coming in to assist us. And then kind of talk about what is next, 2020 and beyond. So a little intro to Maxim. This is what Pavel. Let me get a little light. Okay. So this is what Shoham read a few minutes ago. We've got over 200 offices nationwide. We provide home health care services, healthcare staffing, behavioral care, personal care, giving services, and population health and wellness. So essentially, I'm a much more visual person. Here's a little graphic for you, but we hire nurses, caregivers, of all different modalities all across the country. We bring them on as a W-2 employee. We also bring patients on as clients. So they actually sign up to be clients for us, or a facility, a prison, a school, whoever needs nursing care, we will bring them on as a client. And then we will then deploy the caregivers to staff their schedules, whatever they may be. So it's a temporary staffing model, but in healthcare. And specifically, the private duty, the home health nursing, the skilled nursing care is our bread and butter. It probably makes up 75% of our business currently. So basically break down the verticals, our healthcare staffing. In our staffing, we have about 8,400 clients, so that would be big hospital systems, again, prisons, correctional facilities, long-term care facilities, schools. Our home health care, we have over 41,000 clients. Over 15,000 of those are pediatric patients, so children, babies, all the way up through senior citizens. Anyone who has chronic needs, they may be a chronic illness or trauma of some kind, and they need a skilled nurse at home. So not just someone to cook meals for them, but actually provide nursing care. We also have population health and wellness, so that would be immunization clinics, biometric screenings. We would sign up with clients like Boeing, Ericsson when they were a company, right? Amazon, and we will send nurses into their facility to provide screening for their employees to focus on preventive health. We have since, as of January 1st, divested this portion of our business, and we'll get into a little more of that later. All right, a little bit about the structure and the organization of the branch offices. So this is our nationwide footprint. As you can see, we're in every major metropolitan area, also some of the rural areas. Our headquarters is in Baltimore, Maryland, specifically Columbia, Maryland. Columbia with a U, so not Colombia, it's Columbia. And so you can see how we're spread out across the country. Of these 215 offices, we're broken into 3 regions. So we have a north, south, and a west. I think prior to Pavel's visit, we had 5. So somehow he got rid of 2 different regions for us. And this is a basic structure of an office. So every little dot on the screen here is an individual brick and mortar location, right? And we would have a local presence to network in the community, to meet our caregivers, to hire them, onboard them. And so a brick and mortar location might look something like this. It could have anywhere from 7 to 50 people, depending on the scale of the operation, but essentially you have a director of business operations over what we'd say over the whole house. You have your clinicians, so your clinical team, they make sure we're providing the correct care according to the doctor's orders. Everything we do is under the physician's orders. Then we have different business development managers for different verticals. So in this example, we would have maybe a home health vertical that would be specific to a particular geographic territory in that market. So if this is Atlanta, Georgia, maybe they're North Atlanta, and then you might have another vertical that focuses on South Atlanta. They would have multiple recruiters who will recruit the caregivers consistently and place them with the patients. And then we might also have a staffing vertical. So this vertical would focus on the correctional facilities, the skilled nursing facilities, hospitals, and more of the facility type location. They would also have recruiters. And then we have what's called our field support team. So this is our field support manager. This is all the administrative, non-value add activities. So our billing and payroll, onboarding of the caregivers, credentialing, and also medical records management. As you can imagine, in healthcare, highly regulated. So there's very strict rules and policies and procedures we have to follow. And then we have our field staff that represents all of the caregivers that are out in the field actually providing the care. Just a little history on myself. I started as a recruiter 15 years ago in Southern California. So Jan, I was out in beautiful San Bernardino, which is actually a very low-income, it's not a destination, but very big low-income population that desperately needed our services. So it was a very successful office. I started as a recruiter, worked my way up where I ran an office, and then eventually I stepped into a nationwide role where we formalized these functions here. Up to that point, there was no standardization, no consistency, and so my first task nationwide was to establish this structure to help provide services, and then to optimize that over the coming years. Eventually, that would mutate and morph into the continuous improvement department and using the Adizes methodology to continue to drive that forward. Again, prior to 2016, so this is a little bit more what it looks like today. Prior to 2016, our staffing vertical might be its own office in the same market, right? So you had very, very many small offices. At one point, I think we had almost 400 offices nationwide. And so one of the things we realized we'll get into in a minute is we didn't have scale, and we needed to combine. And if we could bring them under one roof, we now had scale and efficiency in the field support area and also in just the brick and mortar space and the recruitment efforts. You want to jump in there, Pavel?
Yeah, small comment. I mean, company was losing money. 400 offices, not enough scale. So first few things we did in structure, we actually decided that we need less offices, more scale. But at the same time, many offices were predominantly focused on healthcare, and staffing was kind of like a secondary concern, and sometimes, was basically carried out by the same people. So what we said, hey, you can have one office, but staffing is basically a different green unit. So this person and this person are usually different guys. Plus we had, I guess, dotted line relationship of these staffing guys to like a central staffing guy who's responsible for development of a whole staffing business across the company. So we tried to put more effort on staffing, which is actually easier money, frankly speaking, and try to leverage their footprint. Those are not green in Adizes colors. I mean, these are greens, right? These are not greens, but for visual purposes, they're green here.
Thanks, Pavel. And just a word about how do we generate revenue? Where does the income come from? For every hour that we have a caregiver in the home, we get reimbursement from the insurance company, whether it's workers' comp. I'd say 70% is state funding, which is we call in the States our Medicaid program, Medi-Cal in California, TennCare in Tennessee. They all have different names in every state, but very, very complex process for billing and receiving collections. In the staffing, like Pavel said, much easier. You set up a contract with the facility. They reimburse you for the hours produced. So for every hour we schedule somebody, we reimburse for that, and we get a certain amount of spread. So just for the context of how we actually generate revenue, does that make sense? Does that translate to everybody with different understanding of?
And currently it's like 1.5 or more, probably more.
Yeah, probably, yeah. So annual revenue is about 1.5 billion, somewhere in that ballpark total. Yep. All right, so a little history lesson here. We're going to get into organizational life cycle. The company was started in 1988 by two cousins, Jim Davis and Steve Bisciotti. Steve Bisciotti now is the owner of the Baltimore Ravens football club that the Tennessee Titans just knocked out of the playoff run. So, which I feel bad. I live in Tennessee. I live in Nashville. I have more friends are Baltimore Ravens fans because of the work with Maxim Healthcare. So. 1988 to 1993, I would say, would be our courtship and our infancy, probably already into go-go by that point. Jim and Steven had already had very successful staffing firms with tech systems and aerotech, very successful. Maxim was kind of their healthcare vehicle. So they had a formula that worked. We just had to figure it out in healthcare. 1993, I'm going to say, is when we really launched into go-go period. That's when we got into California. We purchased a company called Medi-Cal, and that's where we really ramped up. Explosive growth. Couple traits at that time. Just want to make sure I have it. We expanded very quickly. We started putting in offices in, like Starbucks, pretty much right down the road from each other. Very abnormal go-go. Lack of A. Extremely lack of A. Lack of systems to prevent the bad apples and lack of controls. It was a very Wild West mentality. Very Wild West, explosive growth, young men right out of college making way too much money, and obviously that was going to head for problems. In about 2008, we got a major heart attack. Essentially, we had an office in New Jersey that was billing for services for patients that had already passed away. And so you can see, we didn't even have controls to catch them. Right? So that launched us into investigations, a corporate integrity agreement, a deferred prosecution agreement. So a very tumultuous period. We would say, in talking with Pavel, essentially premature aging, maybe unfulfilled entrepreneur. Unfulfilled entrepreneur would be most correct to the sign. I think our code at that time, after we got into the mess, was big A, blank for E, low I, low P. I mean, everything really just kind of came to a halt. Do you want to jump in there?
When they entered in this mess, huge P, huge E, almost zero I, really bad A. So it's P, E, that's it. So by our methodology, it's basically they went here. And they were close to being shut down, lots of agreements with government, lots of consultants imposed by the government, lots of compliance consultants imposed by the government, lots of legal stuff, etc. So when, for example, we started working with, and it actually was even before, in 2000, somewhere here, the A was big, but it was like lots of bureaucracy. Not too many systems, lots of people behind it, lots of people from outside, inside, etc. P went down, E almost like really low, really low. Some I mean, when you meet these people, I mean, Mike is a good representative, but almost all of them, I mean, many of them. I remember first session with them, I did PEI assessment, and I told them, hey, you are the company with the highest level of individual I's I ever worked with, right? So they have lots of guys. I mean, usually, I have many companies who have lots of E's, lots of P's, but they have, half of their managers in the rooms, there were probably 28 of them, had I as their number one role. So it's made our process easy, but sometimes you need to push them as well. So yes, I mean, that was after this heart attack. They ended up in, I don't know how we call it. I mean, basically it was abnormal adolescence, I would say, right? Or, I mean, they were just trying to get out of crisis here, trying to get back, not too successfully for some years.
Yeah, and again, I was there for 15 years, and this period was awful. It was awful. We were losing people left and right. Our executive team, we had a revolving door of the executive team coming in, coming out. Everybody thought they knew what to do. No one was really working together. And then it was about 2016, our CEO left. Our vice president of finance at the time, Bill Butts, was then promoted to CEO. He had done work with the Adizes Institute back in the 90s.
I would like to mention that when did the Ravens get the championship? Which year?
What year was that?
They beat Broncos, I mean, that's a pain for them.
Which year?
It was 2013, probably, something like that.
2013?
12 or 13, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, they probably
No, cannot be. Much before 6 years ago.
beat.
Much earlier. Because when I worked with the parent company, call it parent company, that's the year that they got the championship. It was a big celebration, I remember. And I want to mention that 2001, maybe. So that's 16 years sounds good. Why am I mentioning that? Because how long does it take for Adizes to penetrate the company? We worked with them at that time. They kept the name, and then when they were in trouble, they called. So, I mean, we should always have a long-range view with the client, a long-range view. It's not, something that's like fast food. And the owner at that time, I think the guy that left, the owner of the club, was not interested in this anymore. The one that was left, to me, was a big A. He just could not. We did not have the chemistry. I just simply walked away. But look how later on it comes up. I mean, that's very interesting. Now, the guy that's president of this company that invited us, was he at that time in the company?
Yes, he was.
So that's it, you see.
He was much younger man.
Never mind, but things, you see, you put a seed and you wait for the time to occur. The time, it is like pregnancy. The timing has to be right. And the timing was right, so never give up, guys. Never give up. You put the seeds, and we had one situation which I would like to share with you because everybody's concerned about sales. One of my associates called a client that said, no, we're not interested in Adizes. A year or 2 years later, he just called and said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm so glad you called. Oh my God, I really need. Never give up because you don't know when the woman is ready to get pregnant. I mean, just keep going.
Amen to that. All right, so 2016, our CEO, he really wanted to make sure that he had a collaborative approach to going forward. They knew they had to break through the silos. He remembered working with the Adizes. He called. I think Pavel answered the phone, if I remember correctly, and that's where we kind of got it going. 2016 is when we launched the Syndag, and in a second here we'll go over what was going on with the company at that time. From 2016 to 2017, we had to drastically increase the production. We were about to lose money. We had to really get it going. Had to focus on creating a healthy big A. E stayed small. That's kind of a chronic issue for us. And then I started to grow, started to rebuild the trust, started to rebuild the connections and the time together. So now 2017 going forward, I would say current state, big P, big A, healthy A, I, not quite prime, but maybe a healthy adolescence. And then 2019 was actually an interesting year for us, and we'll get into that more here in a minute. All right, so why did Maxim hire Adizes? What was going on at that time? We kind of foreshadowed a little bit, but ultimate manifestation is we were facing, we were going to lose $9 million. In the red, $9 million by the end of the year, and that's really where we kind of said, hey, we need some help getting out of this. We had a culture of fear. People were afraid to focus on the business because you're afraid you'd get fired if you went out of compliance. Very strict policies and procedures. Government restrictions under the agreements of the CIA and the DPA. Very strict agreements of what we could and could not do. We couldn't even talk about net income growth. We couldn't even talk about spread growth. We weren't even allowed to have those conversations. Lack of focus on production and lack of focus on entrepreneurship. Lack of systems. We didn't have the systems. We had expensive consultants. So a lot of challenges going on at the time. Low levels of trust. And everyone was working in silos. No one was working collaboratively. Everybody was just head down, focusing on what they were doing. So it was a really big challenge in 2016 that Bill wanted some help to get out of. So what did Adizes do? Well, we had the Syndag in 2016, ultimately 214 pips at the time. Coming out of that, we named a chairperson for a diversity and inclusion board. We noticed, and I'll get into it a little bit more, but we had a grossly just white, male-dominated leadership and culture altogether, and so we needed to make some big changes there. We established focus on quality and continuous improvement, so we actually created department heads to focus on those initiatives. We had to go through, one of the hardest things was a reduction of 6% of our workforce, primarily in administrative roles, so we could reinvest that into more production roles. And that was one of the hardest things the company's ever had to go through. 6% doesn't feel like a deep cut, but when you're letting go a lot of your friends and you're letting go a lot of good people, it felt like a deep cut, and it was difficult to do, but necessary. We created a senior VP level to focus on growth, and what we finally had for the first time when we created these senior VP levels, instead of all these outside people coming in thinking they knew how to run this company in this niche, for the first time we had organic growth. People who had been with the company for 10 plus years were now in these senior leadership roles. They knew the people, they knew the company, they knew what to do, and they were able to be much more effective than anyone coming from the outside. We trained 2 internal integrators in November 2017. That's when myself and my boss, Rob Gaiman, spent a week out in Carpinteria with Shoham laying on the beach, and somehow learned a ton. And we established our POC. Now POC, POC in the healthcare world stands for plan of care, and so it's big definitions conflict to use the term POC. The plan of care is literally the physician's orders that the caregivers have to follow when providing care. So it's basically like the Bible in the home, right? Like it is a sacred document. So we changed it to CIC, Continuous Improvement Council. And that aligns with our continuous improvement department. So small change in verbiage to solve and improve the PIPs ongoing. So once we were trained. Anything to add there, Pavel? You good? Keep rolling. So once we were trained on the Adizes methodology and the process, we had to continue cascading and addressing these PIPs and PIP patterns. So we've done over 20, not even center teams, but I guess initiatives that would then have multiple center teams within them. I'm going to highlight just a few. I don't want to bore you guys. In fact, if you're already getting bored, just flag me down. I'll skip to the end where we make $100 million in 3 years. Okay, spoiler alert. All right. All right, so the diversity and inclusion, like I said, coming out of the SINDAG, we realized we had a problem with diversity and inclusion. So one of the Nikes coming out of it was to create a diversity council. The person who brought it up was appointed, she was one of our head legal counsel, to form a committee and kick off a center team to analyze the data and the PIPs. And this was something for our CEO, Bill Butts, who is a white male. It was just excruciating for him to sit in here and hear these perceptions and hear how the company was viewed from a non-white person, non-white background, and from women, non-white men. And he made a commitment that would always be a part of our culture going forward. And we have a tremendous focus on that now, and I think we're much stronger for it. At the top level, senior level, we're still very homogenous, but our hiring now is probably 50%. To have more diversity in our hiring, and of course it'll take time for that to grow. And we look at it not just in a photograph, not just color of who's in the room and color and gender, but also just backgrounds. Where are people from? Where are they studying? Where are they learning? And bringing in that diversity of thought is also critical. So we've explored the issue, created a board, and then there's many initiatives going along with that. We do training regularly now to challenge unconscious bias. Internal investigations process. This was a tough one. So our internal investigations process is if you have a caregiver that's accused of fraudulent activity or accused of abuse in the home or mistreatment of a patient or falling asleep. If they're working a night shift and they fall asleep, they're not allowed to do that. We have an internal investigation. Maybe it's something inside the office where there's hanky-panky going on or something going on, quid pro quo. We have an internal investigations process. And this is where we still have a lot of A, and that's an A function. But the challenges here with the investigations process is we have a compliance department, we have our legal department, and we have employee relations. And so you have the three really big A's that have to work together to collaborate to improve this process. This was a very high conflict. The field offices hate the compliance department because they stifle everything that you're trying to do. Sometimes it can take months for an investigation to come through and you're sitting here waiting for a caregiver. So this was a really big challenge. What we did come up with, we were able to implement a new system to automate. We were able to make a lot of incremental changes and cross-understanding. So we were able to make some tremendous improvement. At the end of the day, we still have challenges ultimately with the mindset and the people in the departments. And so this is something we're still working through. Again, incremental success, but for where we want it to go and the opportunities that are there, they still exist. So we'll continue to work through this one. Employee life cycle was something that came up where when we're onboarding new internal team members, it was just a bad experience. They would arrive for their first day of work with no computer. They're not set up on the systems. Some people reported they came to work and their boss didn't even know they were starting that day. Or, maybe their direct report would know they're starting, but no one else in the office knew. And so just a bad experience. If you show up on your first day of work and you weren't even thought of, your desk is not ready, retention is gonna hurt. And we were seeing that in the numbers. We're about a 60% retention rate. And so we launched this process to improve the experience, improve the efficiency, the standardization, get the hardware there by the first day, make sure they can log in, do everything. The other piece, they would call them in, and they'd spend the first 2 hours of the day on the phone with our solution team trying to get their computer set up, and we got all of that out of there. And now they get hired, they're ready to go. They can jump into a standardized onboarding, a standardized first week of what they're going to do. We plan that they're going to go to lunch with their leader. They're going to do X, Y, Z. You're going to train for a couple hours, then you're going to get your hands dirty for the next couple hours actually doing some work. Standardize that process. We did a tremendous session on the accountability video that Dr. Adizes had done. where we had a challenge with accountability. In our re-syndag, it came out that one of our biggest pit patterns was lack of accountability. And so we developed a process using the formula, make sure I get it right, responsibility closely equals capability, more or less equals reward. And so we developed an entire process to dig into that at our director of business opportunity level, so at the level of our leadership per market. And it just tremendous results. And essentially, by the end of the session, they knew what their top 5 priorities were for a day. They knew exactly how they were going to be held accountable. And then everything else below those top 5, they knew were kind of secondary things to accomplish throughout the day. Wildly successful. Even a year later, I've had people tell me that they keep that document on their desk. They refer to it every day to make sure that they're staying on track. One of the most exciting things that we've done that I enjoy the most is our market segment change programs. Once again, we had Pavel come in and he helped us where we started to look at, okay, an individual office might have challenges, an individual business line might have challenges. How can we go in there, slice up the salami, and start to address the pit patterns, and most importantly, train them on how to do this going forward, right? Train them how to be this organic mechanism to continually address their challenges and their problems. So I'll skip through a few. Our vaccination and wellness division, like I said, when we sliced into this one, we found it is a tremendous disruption on the offices. Essentially what we would do is sell the business nationwide and use our footprint to provide the services in all of these different markets. Well, sometimes you had a neighboring state, if we didn't have a process, you would have to send supplies and nurses 4 hours away, 6 hours away sometimes to do these 4-hour flu shot clinics at Costco, right? And so people hated it. And eventually, we did implement some systems to make it better, but eventually the decision was made to go ahead and divest that entire division. It's much better ROI now. We did our Memphis. We focused on our Memphis market. Memphis market was very good tenured leadership. However, they had an over 50% retention rate, so they're churning 50% of their employees, and they hadn't hit spread goals in 3 years. And so this is probably the biggest success story, but we came in, and I don't know if you want to jump in on any of this, Pavel, but our Memphis market, we did a complete syndag, complete diagnosis, took them through countless center teams addressing the pit patterns, and within 1 year's time, their attrition dropped to 0. They had 100% retention rate. In fact, 2 of their leaders of the office got promoted to higher levels, and they hit their goal. They hit their sales goals, 120% over goal for the first time in years using this process. So we're starting to replicate that now. I launched one recently in Orlando. Did you want to add anything to the?
Memphis was a small miracle. It sometimes happens with Maxim. You just do your job. You just do syntax, inner teams, POC. We did POC, and somehow in 1 year they have a total transformation. So I, frankly speaking, don't know how it happened. We just follow the process. And of course, Mike and Rob were driving majority of senior teams. But that was a good example, and you guys are basically replicated the success to other offices right now, right?
Yeah, that's right. We kicked off our Orlando market recently. And Orlando was different in that they had financial success, but it was a toxic environment. It was a dumpster fire in the office. People were leaving, they hated it. I don't know how they were still being financially successful and losing all the consumables, so much friction and conflict within the office. But so that was almost a kind of a complete flip. So we've started work with them this summer, and already to date now, since we've started, we haven't lost a single person, which is the longest that they've had a fully staffed team. Significant difference in the culture when you walk in the office, and now we're starting to see it in the metrics. We're starting to see it in their operations, and really just the mutual trust and respect within the office. It's a tangible change. Similar process with our travel services. Our travel services is travel nursing. I don't know if you've heard of that, where we can hire a caregiver that lives in Kansas, and she can go live in New York City for 13 weeks on a contract, and it's much better spread rates, and we do that all from Tampa, Florida. And so we launched a team there, and the difference there is this is a very high volume. There's probably over 300 recruiters and 150 field support members, so the volume, the scale is just tremendous and mind-blowing. So that has its own challenges. We can have our center teams, we can run the systems, but we're still not touching everybody, so we have to figure out how do we spread the mutual trust and respect. And that was high conflict, very high conflict. Center team, they hated each other. When we got the PIPs, they hated each other. They don't respect us, they're disrespectful, they think they're better than us, they're entitled. All they care about is the money. It was just a very high conflict environment. But we were able to go in there, pick the scab a little bit, get them to a place where they were kind of admitting that they weren't doing things correctly, admitted they have a problem, and we've been able to build on that. The last one I want to mention was kind of a pretty neat initiative that we did at our national meeting. We had an opportunity. We wanted to really kickstart the Adizes methodology and get people to really understand what it was. And so at our national meeting, where we pulled all of our leaders down to Orlando, Florida, Rob and I taught a workshop where we essentially ran mock center teams. We did about 80 mock center teams. We trained 80 leaders, so senior leaders, on how to facilitate, kind of how to run an effective meeting, how to facilitate. And then as we had our 800 attendees come through, they would sit, 10 at a session and kind of go through the process of how to run an effective meeting. We did a little bit of education on the front end, and then we essentially taught them how to do this. One of the things, should we play the video, Pablo, you think? How are we doing on time? Are we doing okay on time?
Let's do a small warm-up.
Just do a small little do video. Okay. So one of the examples, we had to make it a very fun and engaging session, right? Things get boring really quickly. So we shot a video that I'd like to share for you that helped them understand why we need rules at a meeting. And so, what's that? Oh yeah, let me make sure the sound is on. So this video, we had our production team put it together for us, and hopefully this isn't too loud. We had our production team put it together for us, and one thing that's really fun about this, and I think one of the most successful things about what we've done, is that we have executive sponsorship. So I know you don't know the people in this video, and that's fine. You'll recognize me. But the first person you see, it's our CEO. And then you see our CIO and our CFO, and some of our senior leadership is in this video poking fun at themselves, and that really translates a lot to everybody in the offices who really enjoyed, seeing some of the jokes here. So again, we teed this up saying, here's what derails meetings. This is why we need to have rules. So we'll play. It's only a few minutes long. Little energizer.
Sorry guys, is meeting started already? Dang on, Mike. Sorry guys. Again. Sorry guys, McRib is back. Sorry guys, I'm late because so we had a great year last year, guys. Really hit the peak of our performance. That reminds me just of a time like skiing on the peak of a mountain. So I got this puppy. I had a McRib sandwich the other day. I started taking pictures. The next thing you know, I saw this bird. And so we just had an amazing vacation. It was just a really fun time. Speaking of spread, I went to the deli the other day and had the most amazing sandwich with like this Dijon spread on it. It was countless hours mapping this out. If you take away anything from the meeting today, this is the most important piece I need you to get. So as I was saying, that's our CIO, Ricky Coffee. As I was saying, the most important takeaway that you guys need to get is Alex, what do you think?
Well, I think we need to take extreme ownership of that. I think it's a problem. We need to take extreme ownership of that. You know what Navy SEALs would say? We need to take extreme ownership of that. After all, the only ownership we should accept is extreme ownership.
That's a great point. I'm going to stack on that. I am not one to stack, but I'm going to stack on that. Both points are very good. I'm going to double stack, triple stack, quadruple stack.
crazy. I heard you promoted 100 guys within the first year. I promoted 6 people in my first year, but I mean, we can't all be right? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're okay after the sailing accident. I mean, I survived the Titanic twice. How amazing! I heard you went to Florida for vacay. How was it? I went to Maui, but I'm sure Florida was just as great.
Guys, Q4 was pitiful, so we're going to have to really make up some ground.
I think you guys got it.
Here's what we do, guys. We gotta catch that vision and fly. We get the fish. You know what I'm saying? I like how we're swinging for the fences, boys, but I think we're grabbing the bat a little too tight. Teamwork makes the dream work. Better do a checkup from the neck up, or we are going to wreck it. Just try to do it from good grade, people. Good to keep great. Tell you what, it's getting a little too comfortable in this game. Swing lanes. Get one. Out. Just like the grid we are. Back. Love it. Yeah. You know, the secret really changes for the lead dog. Oh.
Okay, what is going on here? What are we trying to accomplish? Where is the agenda? What do you feel the agenda should be? Okay, sounds like we're not going to get an agenda. Rob, it's okay. Bring it in. Insert your heart. The agenda is within you. What? Namaste.
So that's a little fun, right? We had a.
Let's have a big applause for Micah.
We still have a little bit more, if that's okay. I felt like a good ending, right? Probably we should have ended. We should have prioritized. Oh yeah. So we had a little fun with that, and I think it translated well to the team. So real quick, last segment here. What is next for Maxim in 2020? So 2019 was a really weird year for us. At the beginning of the year, they actually announced that we were going to be selling our home care division, which again is 70% of our business. So for the entire year, we thought half of the company was going to be going to another company who purchased us at a premium. I mean, just an insane rate that they were going to pay. And after a year's time, the FTC still had not approved it. And the more we learned about the company that was purchasing the home care division, our owner decided, after 1 year's time, he had the opportunity to revisit the agreement, and he decided he did not want to move forward with the sale. And so we are going to stay together as one company. However, you can imagine a year of that internal marketing wreaked some havoc on our mutual trust and respect. So I think this will be the most critical year for integration. So myself, Rob, Pavel, we've got our work cut out for us here. Are we good on time? Okay. All right, I can slow down a little bit then. So it's going to be a big year. A couple of the things we're going to do is maintain our executive CIC, again, our executive POC level every 6 to 8 weeks or so. We're going to build additional in-company integrators to help us. My ideal situation would be to have one per each region that I'll be able to help train and run and make sure that we're going in the right direction. We'll get them down to the training with Shoham as well. We're going to launch multiple market-specific change programs. Pretty soon here, we're going to get into mission action plan in 2023 with structure adjustments to increase E. Again, that continues to be probably the biggest challenge for us. And then we'll have a new SINDAG slated for mid-2020. So I think I skipped a little bit ahead. I know Pavel wanted to jump in and talk a little bit about some of the structure and action plans that we had put in place, I guess. Yeah.
What I learned working for Maxim, that they prevented me from doing mistake again. Sometimes when we work with our clients, we try to push them for the best structure. And frankly speaking, I remember my experience with them. I was definitely pushing them for more E at that time. I wanted them to develop more verticals, different types of vertical behavioral services, and some other services, like instead of just doing healthcare and staffing, we wanted more verticals. But we had a really good environment, so they pushed back. And what I realized later on, that it was a good pushback, because first interaction of structure just focus on, hey, let's cut some A, let's focus on P, let's basically have a COO type of person who will drive for P, because we need results fast. If we don't get results fast, we may not have an opportunity to build E anyway. So our first draft of structure, first change of structure was mainly focused on reducing extra layers of A, focusing on P, go to markets, produce revenue, control your cost, get out of this unhealthy adolescence. And right now, I guess only right now, 3 years after our 2.5 years, sort of, after our first structure change, right now they should be ready for this in their structure as well, right? So we will get together. We are not bleeding. We are totally fine, although 2019 was tough, as Micah said, but financially 2019 was still better than 18. So money-wise, they are good. They don't need to lay off people for that purpose, and they definitely have lots of people inside of a company who will be able to lead different new initiatives here in E. We'll also need to discuss lots of technological perspective, because industry is changing, healthcare a lot as well. They're bringing lots of technology in healthcare, and we need to talk about it. Because in the past, competitive advantage of Maxim was basically national footprint. 200 plus offices, that was a national footprint, and good nurses. Right now, I don't think it's enough. I mean, they need to probably upgrade themselves in technology and bring a new type of competitive advantage if they want to beat the competition, right? So for me, again, lesson learned, and I learned this lesson for the second time. If you remember, a couple of years ago, I had a company of the year from Belarus, which I was also pushing for like a quite aggressive structure, which we actually implemented, but in 3-step approach. So we went for minor change year 1, a deeper change year 2, and a quite revolutionary change year 3. Although when I had a first session on them on structure, I was talking about this revolutionary change year 1, which is a mistake. Which is a mistake. We should always be aware of life cycle. I mean, if your life cycle is really abnormal adolescence, I mean, you don't go directly to aggressive E. You need to right the ship, you need to go back into P. And it's actually even in our books. Focus on P, focus on producing results, revenue, then later on we'll do that, right? Mike and Rob were leading majority of senior teams, and cascaded efforts were led by internal guys. And that was a good effort what you guys did in terms of bringing this 800 executives. I mean, more or less every manager in Maxim right now knows Adizes language, which is important. I mean, they're not trained deep, but they know Adizes language, they know how to run meetings, they know PAI, so they need those basic concepts, which makes your life much easier. When you work with all of them, I had a meeting with them like a year ago with the staffing division. We thought that healthcare will be solved. So they asked me, hey, come help us, how do we organize us if we're just staffing company? So we had a good session, but it was relatively easy to run because language was there. Right now, we're meeting with them in a couple of weeks. Idea is to rebuild trust. Hey, we are still the same company. We have many years to go. I guess I asked Bill question directly. Hey, Bill, can we guarantee people at least 5 years? Because, I mean, if we start doing that and in 1 year you'll sell healthcare division, it will be tough. seems to be that we can guarantee that. So we're looking forward to developing a new direction for them, probably much more externally oriented, much less internally oriented, right?
Awesome. And do you have the? Okay. All right. So last couple slides on what we're looking at for 2020, and then I want to go over a little bit of lessons learned and kind of how we kind of took an approach to do this in company. But for 2020 and beyond, for P, focus on those production activities, our business development, and our recruitment. We have rolled out some new systems that we're continuing to optimize and have to drive the proper use of it. And we'll drive that activity is going to directly result into spread, which is what we call our kind of our gross income, and that's what the offices are held to, is the spread. For our A, we're going to continue to focus on our system optimization, so very healthy A. We have an app that we've been rolling out to move to electronic payroll, so we're not using paper anymore. We'll continue to drive that. And policy revision. So as we talked about, we are still splitting out our staffing to be its own entity under its own tax ID, separate from the home health care. The home health care is extremely regulated. So when we're hiring a caregiver, it can take 14 to 21 days to hire them. For a temp employee, that's very long. On our staffing side, we're trying to get that down to 2 days. And so we have to rewrite our policies and procedures to cut out a lot of the bureaucracy and some of the additional training that we're going to do. So we're going to focus a lot on that. So at least our staffing division, which has kind of been the redheaded stepchild for a while, can really grow and hit the growth that they have. Just a quick word on our staffing division. For the past few years, we've only been growing about 3%, which is on industry average. Since our session with Pavel in the summer, last 6 months of 2019, growth was 10 to 12%. Just in that period. So just by changing the structure a little bit, focus, and a little bit of change on the policies, we're already seeing results, and should easily be double-digit growth in that division consistently for years to come. Our E, as Pavel said, we have to focus on E. That's a vitamin. We're deficient in E. We want to focus on disruptive technology. We've got to focus on the technology, and we've got the team to do it. The frustrating part is we have a very talented team to do it. But a lot of the mindset is very, very relational based, which is great. Relationships are the key. But when it comes to, I believe that relationships are the key for the sale. But then once you sale, we have to deliver at just an extremely efficient rate, right? Very quickly. And so we're trying to get them into the mindset of, how do you use technology to its full advantage, but also keep the people side in place. U.S. healthcare evolution, it is a number one topic on every presidential campaign. It will continue to be so in 2020. There's always reform happening. We've got to stay on top of the reform, and we've got to find those opportunities that are in there, which is a daunting task if you've ever tried to read anything on U.S. healthcare reform. And then for our I, we've got to integrate our individual markets. Like I said, we have the 200 offices where you could have good relationships, bad relationships. We've got to integrate there. We're going to have a new structure at the top that needs to be integrated, and then we have our home health and our staffing that are going to be two separate entities, but we want to have the same culture, the same camaraderie. We want them to assist each other, put the good of the company above the good of themselves, and kind of look at it at a higher level. So again, just what are some keys to success? What did I learn in the last 2 years doing this? What helped us be, I'm going to say it, successful. I'm going to just claim it. I'm going to claim that we won an award. It's got to be successful to a point, right? And what were the results? Definitely increased mutual trust and respect. I mean, you could feel it. We got to a point, before we announced the acquisition, I could make one phone call to our payroll department that covers, again, 30,000 caregivers, not to mention another 8,000 internal employees, and ask to make one exception for an office to do their payroll an entire day earlier, and they'd say, yep, you got it. Like, no questions asked. Like, we just had such mutual trust and respect. We could make one phone call and just get things moving because there was just a high enough level of trust that we knew what we were doing. We didn't have to go get that approved by 10 different people. The financial success, like Pavel said, 2016, we're looking at a $9 million loss. In 2018, we had a $70 million net income, so fully allocated $70 million net income. 2019, in the middle of this merger taking place, we did over $100 million in net income, which is our 18 and 19, our biggest years in the company's history, 30-year history. just absolutely incredible. So again, we don't want to take a step back here in 2020 as we keep going forward. But some of the things that we learned, having that executive sponsorship, like we said, our CEO was bought in, our CFO, everybody was bought into the process, bought into helping to drive, to give Rob and I the support we needed to pull these teams together. I mean, we would, for a lot of these sessions we would run, we'd have people flying from all over the country to attend the center team at headquarters. So there's significant investment. There's time investment for the leaders. There's financial investment for the flights and the hotels and everything that goes along with it. But if we needed it, they were willing to do that for us, which was wonderful. And we tried to maximize the time. With that in mind, we started doing a process where we would have them do some center team training in advance of the session, and then we would actually do a PIP accumulation in advance. I'm going to make sure I don't get shot over here. Show him here's about this. We talked about it, actually. So we would do a PIP accumulation in advance. So we would tee it. We would tell them what a PIP is, what constitutes a PIP. We would give them a very basic, like Excel template, so they would actually, type it out for us in an Excel template. And we'd collect these PIPs in advance. And what that would do is to give Rob and I time. We could pattern, we could causality, we could spread them, and we could really spoof. We could really spoof out to see where we were going to go. And you could kind of see what landmines we're looking at. And you could already get a tone for what the conflict in the room was going to be. So it would really help us with our preparation. Now, we most likely get more PIPs. And there's even quite a few like petty PIPs would kind of come out. But that's okay. We work through it. And, we just be able to take a little bit more time. And that also taught us kind of a technique for patterning, which helped us be a little more efficient in our patterning. So if we were going to write a pattern, we wouldn't say something like, I know not to do lack of mutual trust and respect, or say lack of communication. We would always start with the subject. So we say communication is at a loss, or communication is suboptimal. And so we would start every pattern with whatever the subject was, whether it's communication or what processes or retention rate, whatever the subject was, we would start our pattern with that. So that way, if we're going down the list of the patterns we created, we could very easily kind of identify them. We could sort them in alphabetical order and just make it a little bit easier to manage. So just a couple little tools, little tricks of the trade that we picked up along the way. For us, our biggest keys of success was preparation. We would put in tremendous amounts of preparation for every session. We would type out an extremely detailed agenda of the process, of the steps we would go through. If there's some education we wanted to hit. So we would have a very structured plan going into it, but also we would listen for the music and we would dance as we needed to, and we would get the vibe of the room. And if something wasn't landing, you could tell by body language, you could tell if something wasn't connecting. We would just kind of keep digging on it to make sure we got the breakthrough that we needed. And it wasn't all easy, right? We definitely hit some rough spots. There were times we were doing an executive session, and it was a 2-day session. I think we were kind of doing our re-syndag. We were kind of re-upping on some things. And by the end of the day, it just ended on such a down note. It was such a downer that Rob and I were just like, man, what the hell happened? This just did not go the way we thought it was going to go. Some of the executives seemed really upset, and our friends that were executives were like, man, I don't know how you guys are going to pull out of this one, but, good luck. We'll see what you come up with tomorrow. And so we just kind of stay in the office all night, order in some Chinese food, and just kind of figure out how, where to go from there and to bring it back out. And I think mentally I blocked out what went wrong because I can't remember exactly what got us to that point. But the next day we kind of came in with a fresh approach and ended the session on top, and everybody felt really great about it and where we went from there. Like I said, the investigations process we went through didn't quite go the way that we had thought it would, right? So there's a lot of learning experiences there. By having the 3 departments, we essentially had 3 implementers, which is less than ideal, and we couldn't really get agreement on some of the big picture decisions that had very legal ramifications to it. We actually couldn't have one implementer for this session because our CEO would, our legal team and our employee relations team reports to the CEO. Our compliance division reports directly to the board of directors because they're kind of a checks and balance for us, right? And so, so you really had 3 heads that just made it really difficult to get agreement on some of the process changes we wanted to do there. So we learned a big challenge there that always make sure we have one implementer, one final say on the direction that we're going. A couple defreeze techniques that we learned. If we had a high conflict room, we would usually do something funny and light for a defreeze, kind of loosen things up a little bit before we got into the deeper stuff. But if it was a low conflict room, we would usually try to do like a deep defreeze, something like, tell us about your dad, or something, something that was a little more introspective. What's a talent you wish you had? What's something you wish you could do? If you were in a different career, what would you be? And so you kind of get people to kind of search their soul a little bit, and then it kind of opens them up to go a little bit deeper on some of these, depending on what the topic was. So we kind of learned a little balance there on how to really get where we needed to go. We had 2 instances where we had a high conflict room, and we went into the session ready for a war to break out at any minute, and they were just all very cordial, and it was a very nice day. And, part of me says, that's great, we got out, nobody got in a fight, it was awesome. But then we realized, what's the point of being here? If we're not going to get this out on the table, have an open conversation with one another about it, and really dig deep. And so there were a couple times during the defreeze, we said, illuminations from the night before, or on one of them I said, hey, we had 60% attrition rate. When your friends left, what did they say? Why did they leave? What was the real reason they left? And so then they could kind of share from other people's perspective, and a lot of times they're speaking for themselves about, oh, we're not respected and we're not this, and we're treated as second-class citizens. And then we finally had a breakthrough. We finally had people opening up, and we saw emotion come out, and we saw them really dig deep to really kind of get it out on the table. And so those were a couple big learning experiences where, when somebody kind of starts to choke up a little bit about how they're feeling, you kind of feel like you're getting to a deeper spot, which is in a lot of these sessions really where we needed to go. And so that was kind of a technique we picked up. If we feel like we didn't go deep enough, we didn't go enough layers deep, we would dig on it. The last piece I think that was huge and was a discipline for me is consistent and immediate follow-up. So we would have a session with a team. I would make every effort to get all the notes out and all the work product out either that night or the next day so that you get the momentum going. Because when that momentum's going, they'll run with it. But if you wait a week, you kind of set the example that they're okay to wait as well. And so, and I'm not good at follow-up on my own. I have to force myself to do that. So that was a discipline. I had to really focus on flexing my A little bit, get the notes out, get the follow-up, set the next meeting in everybody's calendar so it's ready to go, and really drive a hard follow-up and hold their feet to the fire to do so. And I think that was another key to success as well. So I'm ready to wrap it up. I wanted to end with one quote. So Rob was supposed to be here with us this week. He couldn't make it due to obligations at home, but he gave us a quote. We'll finish with it because I don't know. He's not the most poetic man, but somehow he came up with a fantastic quote that I want to just read. The Adizes methodology has brought Maxim Healthcare a consistent awareness of the power of mutual trust and respect as we have implemented many of the principles in our problem-solving meetings, which has allowed us to focus much more of our energy on serving our patients, caregivers, and clients. The results have been significant both culturally and financially.